The richest man in the room wasn't the billionaire, it was the waitress who gave without expecting anything in return. The city lights flickered in the distance as Ethan Caldwell gripped the steering wheel, his gaze fixed on the quiet road ahead. A billionaire by title, but tonight none of that mattered. There were no boardrooms, no investors, no luxury, just a father and his son, looking for a simple meal. In the back seat, Oliver sat quietly, his small fingers fidgeting with the zipper on his jacket. He was 10 years old, bright, curious, and full of life, but his body often refused to cooperate. Cerebral palsy made even the simplest tasks a challenge. Ethan stole a glance at him through the rearview mirror and sighed. He hated feeling helpless. "Burger or pancakes?" Ethan asked, trying to sound lighthearted. Oliver's lips curved into a grin. "Pancakes." Ethan chuckled. "Pancakes it is." They weren't far from home, but instead of going to one of the high-end restaurants he usually dined at, he turned onto a smaller road. There was a diner here, one of those old, family-run places with faded signage and a neon open sign that buzzed against the window. It wasn't glamorous, but it had heart. He pulled into the parking lot and put the car in park. Before stepping out, he glanced down at his Rolex, a habit he couldn't break. It was late, but time didn't matter tonight. Oliver was already struggling with his seatbelt. Ethan reached back to unbuckle it for him, then lifted him out of the car with ease. His son wasn't heavy, but every time he carried him, he was reminded of the weight Oliver carried every day. The frustration of wanting to do things on his own, but being trapped in a body that wouldn't cooperate. The diner door chimed as they stepped inside. The smell of fresh coffee and grilled bacon filled the air, and the sound of plates clinking against countertops created a cozy, familiar rhythm. A few late-night customers sat in booths, some lost in conversation, others eating quietly. Then there was her, a young waitress in a blue apron, her curly dark hair pulled into a messy bun. She looked up from wiping down a table and flashed a smile that was warm, effortless, real. "Take a seat wherever you'd like," she said, tucking a notepad into her pocket. Ethan chose a booth near the window. He slid Oliver in first, making sure he was comfortable before taking a seat across from him. The waitress appeared moments later, pen in hand. "What can I get you two tonight?" she asked, her voice gentle, like she actually cared about the answer. Oliver spoke up before Ethan could. "Pancakes, please." She grinned. "Good choice. You want them with chocolate chips or plain?" "Chocolate chips," Oliver said without hesitation. Ethan couldn't help but smile. His son was usually shy with strangers, but there was something about her that put him at ease. "I'll take a coffee. Black," Ethan added. She scribbled down the order. "You got it. Name's Jasmine, by the way. Let me know if you need anything." And with that, she was off, weaving between tables with the kind of grace that only came from experience. Ethan leaned back in his seat, watching her. He had been in and out of the best restaurants in the country, waited on by staff trained to serve the world's elite. But none of them had ever had that effortless kindness, that warmth. Oliver, completely unaware of his father's thoughts, tapped his fingers against the table, humming a tune. For the first time that day, Ethan felt his shoulders relax, but neither of them had any idea that tonight would change everything. Ethan watched as Oliver traced patterns on the condensation forming on the window. The boy was in his own world, his fingers moving with slow, deliberate focus. It was a small thing, but to Ethan, it was a reminder. Every movement, every action was an effort for his son. He exhaled slowly, leaning back against the booth. The smell of fresh pancakes filled the air, but his mind wandered to a different time. A time before the billions, before the luxury, before everything became complicated. Ethan hadn't been born into wealth. He had clawed his way up from nothing. Late nights, early mornings, deals made on blind faith. There had been a time when he counted every dollar, stretched every meal, and wondered if he'd ever make it. Then he did. The company took off, his name became synonymous with success, and suddenly the world treated him differently. He was no longer just a man, he was a billionaire, a symbol of power and influence. But none of that mattered the day his wife died. Oliver had only been 2 when it happened. A car accident. No warning, no goodbye. Just a phone call that shattered his world in an instant. Ethan had buried himself in work after that. If he was negotiating deals, making acquisitions, flying across the world, he wasn't thinking about the empty side of the bed, or the fact that his son would never really know his mother. He made sure Oliver had the best of everything. Doctors, therapists, teachers. If money could fix it, Ethan would throw as much as needed at the problem. But money couldn't fix cerebral palsy. It couldn't make his son's body cooperate the way his mind wanted it to. It couldn't make the world more patient, more understanding. And tonight, it couldn't stop the nagging guilt gnawing at his chest. He should have spent more time with Oliver instead of leaving him with caregivers. He should have learned the little things, the routine, the struggles, the victories, no matter how small. Instead, here they were, father and son, but still strangers in too many ways. A soft thud pulled him out of his thoughts. Oliver had dropped his spoon, his fingers too stiff to keep hold of it. The boy frowned, reaching down, but the spoon had rolled just out of reach. Ethan moved to grab it, but before he could, a hand beat him to it. Jasmine. She crouched down, picking up the spoon with a napkin before standing back up. Here you go, kiddo, she said, handing Oliver a fresh one from her apron pocket. Oliver blinked up at her, then took it with a small, grateful smile. Ethan studied her. No hesitation, no pity, just effortless kindness. Thanks, Oliver murmured. Jasmine winked. Anytime. She set their plates down, pancakes stacked high for Oliver, steaming coffee for Ethan. Ethan nodded his thanks, but Jasmine was already focused on Oliver. You need help cutting those? She asked. Oliver hesitated. I can do it, he said, but the struggle was clear. His fingers curled awkwardly around the fork, his knife slipping as he tried to press down. Ethan's chest tightened. He should be the one helping. He should know what to do. But before he could react, Jasmine did. She pulled up a chair beside Oliver like it was the most natural thing in the world. Tell you what, she said, picking up the knife. I'll do the cutting and you do the eating. Deal? Oliver looked at her, then at the pancakes. Finally, he nodded. Jasmine grinned. That's what I thought. She cut the pancakes into small, bite-sized pieces, pushing the plate closer to him when she finished. Ethan just watched. He had seen countless people interact with Oliver, doctors, teachers, therapists, but there was something different about this. She didn't hover. She didn't treat him like a fragile thing that needed fixing. She just helped, like it was second nature. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan felt something shift inside him. Ethan wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, the heat soaking into his palms as he watched Oliver dig into his pancakes with newfound ease. There was something about the moment, so ordinary yet so rare, that made him pause. Jasmine had already moved on to another table, refilling cups and chatting with customers like she had known them for years. There was no rush in her movements, no robotic politeness. She was the kind of person who made people feel seen. Ethan took a sip of his coffee, letting the bitterness ground him. He was used to people treating him differently the moment they recognized who he was. Some fawned over him, others stiffened, afraid to say the wrong thing. Jasmine hadn't done either. She hadn't even flinched. There was no, "Oh my God, you're Ethan Caldwell," or fake enthusiasm. No strategic conversation steering toward investment opportunities, just genuine, effortless kindness. Oliver, unaware of his father's thoughts, chewed happily. She's nice, he mumbled between bites. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Yeah? Oliver nodded. She talks to me like a regular kid. Ethan's chest tightened. Like a regular kid. Not like someone who needed fixing. Not like someone to be tiptoed around. Just a kid. Jasmine came back, balancing a tray of plates with practiced ease. She slid a check onto the table but didn't rush off this time. You good, kiddo? She asked, nodding toward Oliver's plate. Oliver grinned. Yeah, best pancakes ever. Jasmine put a hand on her hip, smirking. That's a big statement. Oliver shrugged. It's true. Ethan watched the exchange, the way Oliver lit up, the way Jasmine leaned in like what he said actually mattered. He cleared his throat. You been working here long? Jasmine glanced at him, surprised by the question. Few years. It pays the bills. Her tone was light, but Ethan caught the flicker of something in her eyes. You always this good with kids? He asked. Jasmine chuckled. Nah, just the cool ones. She ruffled Oliver's hair before standing straight again. My little brother's got autism. He's a handful, but he's my favorite person in the world. Ethan nodded slowly. That explains it. She tilted her head. Explains what? The patience, he said simply. Jasmine shrugged. Kids like Oliver don't need patience. They need people to listen. Ethan stared at her, caught off guard by the weight of her words. She didn't linger after that. She collected plates, refilled coffee, and went about her night like she hadn't just hit him with the truth he had been avoiding for years, because she was right. Oliver didn't need patience. He needed to be seen, heard, treated like the bright, funny, stubborn kid he was. And Ethan, despite all his success, all his money, had failed at that more times than he cared to admit. He looked at his son, still smiling as he scraped up the last of his pancakes. For the first time in years, Ethan felt like an outsider in his own life, but he also knew that was about to change. The diner had thinned out. A few stragglers sat nursing their coffee, lost in the quiet hum of conversation and the occasional clatter from the kitchen. Ethan checked his watch, later than he realized. Oliver yawned, rubbing his eyes with the back of his hand. He had that sleepy, satisfied look that kids got after a good meal. Jasmine returned, wiping her hands on a rag before tucking it into her apron. "You guys need anything else?" Ethan shook his head. "We're good." But Oliver was struggling again. He reached for his glass of water, fingers tightening around it awkwardly. It slipped before he could get a good grip. The glass tipped. Water splashed across the table, drenching the napkins and rolling toward the edge. Ethan tensed, moving on instinct, but before he could grab a napkin, Jasmine was already there. She didn't jump or react the way most people did. She just moved, calm and easy, like this wasn't anything more than a minor inconvenience. "It's okay," she said, scooping up the glass and flipping it upright. "Happens to me at least twice a day." Oliver's shoulders stiffened. His eyes darted toward Ethan like he was expecting frustration. But Jasmine kept her attention on him, grabbing a clean rag and wiping the table. "You know what helps?" she asked, wringing out the cloth. "Holding the glass with both hands. My little brother does that, and now he barely spills." Oliver blinked up at her. "Really?" "Swear on my favorite sneakers," Jasmine said, holding up a hand like she was making a serious promise. "You want to try?" Oliver hesitated, then reached for the glass again. This time, he used both hands. His grip was steadier. The glass barely wobbled as he lifted it. Jasmine grinned. "See? You got this." Oliver beamed, setting the glass down carefully. Ethan swallowed past the lump in his throat. It was such a small moment. A glass of water, a steady hand, a bit of confidence where there hadn't been before, but it meant everything. Ethan had spent years hiring the best therapists, the most highly trained specialists, people who studied for years to help kids like Oliver. But Jasmine had done in seconds what they never could. She had made his son believe in himself, and that was priceless. Ethan reached for his wallet, ready to leave a ridiculous tip, but Jasmine waved him off. "Don't do that." Ethan frowned. "Why not?" Jasmine shrugged. "Because you don't need to. It's just water, just pancakes." She gestured toward Oliver. "And he's just a kid. A cool one, but still just a kid." Ethan studied her, trying to figure her out. Most people took when they saw money. They adjusted their tone, changed their demeanor, worked angles to see what they could gain. Jasmine didn't do any of that. She had no idea who he was. No idea that he could have written her a check and changed her life with the stroke of a pen. And still, she chose to be kind. Ethan had met CEOs, world leaders, visionaries. He had spent time with the most powerful people in the country, but at that moment, sitting in a modest diner across from his son, he realized something. Jasmine Carter, a waitress working 2 jobs, might be one of the most remarkable people he had ever met, and he wasn't about to walk away without doing something about it. Ethan tapped his fingers against the edge of the table, his mind racing. He had spent years making snap decisions, acquiring companies, making investments, cutting deals that changed industries overnight. But this wasn't business. This was something else entirely. Jasmine had no idea who he was, no clue that the man sitting in her section was worth billions. And yet, she had treated Oliver like a kid first, not a burden, not a problem to solve. Ethan couldn't let that go unnoticed. He pulled out his wallet, fingers brushing against the stack of $100 bills inside. But something about that felt wrong. Jasmine wasn't someone who could be bought. A fat tip wouldn't change anything. So instead, he reached for a business card. Not the generic ones with his company's logo, but the one with his direct contact, the number only a handful of people had. Jasmine returned a moment later, setting the receipt on the table. Take your time, she said, already turning toward another table. Jasmine. She stopped, glancing back. Yeah? Ethan slid the card across the table. What's this? She asked, picking it up. My personal number, Ethan said simply. Jasmine blinked, clearly confused. Why? Ethan chose his words carefully. I don't think you realize how rare you are. Jasmine laughed, shaking her head. I'm a waitress, man. Ain't nothing rare about that. Ethan leaned forward. You didn't just help my son. You saw him. That's not something you can teach. Jasmine's expression softened. He's a good kid. He is, Ethan agreed, and you're a good person. She shrugged, tucking the card into her apron. I just do what I can. Ethan nodded, and that's exactly why I want to help you do more. Jasmine frowned, hesitant. Help me how? Ethan didn't push. Not yet. Call me, he said instead. When you're ready. Jasmine studied him for a long moment. Then, with a slow nod, she tucked the card into her pocket and walked away. Ethan exhaled, glancing at Oliver, who was now fighting off sleep. This night had changed something. He could feel it, but the real change hadn't even begun yet. The night air was crisp as Ethan carried Oliver back to the car. The boy's head rested against his father's shoulder, his breath slow and steady, already half asleep. Ethan settled him into the seat, adjusting his jacket before closing the door quietly. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at the neon glow of the diner's sign. He had walked into this place expecting nothing. A simple meal, a quiet night. Just another moment in a routine that had long felt hollow. Instead, he had found something he hadn't known he was looking for. Jasmine Carter. A waitress, a stranger, someone who had no idea who he was, yet had managed to teach him more in one evening than some people had in years. And she had done it with a plate of pancakes and a little bit of kindness. Ethan pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts. His assistant, his lawyers, his board members, all the people who helped keep his empire running. Then, his thumb hovered over a different number. A school director, an administrator for a foundation he had once donated to, but never really been involved with. Ethan exhaled. Then he hit call. Mr. Caldwell? A groggy voice answered on the other end. Sorry for the late call, Ethan said, glancing back toward the diner. Through the window, he could see Jasmine laughing with another customer, wiping down a table with that same easygoing energy. I need you to pull some numbers for me, he continued. Scholarship applications, nursing programs, job placements and child development. A pause. Then, of course, sir. For anyone in particular? Ethan smiled faintly. Yes, he said, someone worth investing in. Because sometimes the best investments aren't in stocks, companies, or real estate. They're in people. And Ethan Caldwell had just found one he wasn't willing to walk away from. There are people in this world who go unnoticed every day, the ones who give without expecting anything in return. Maybe it's a teacher, a nurse, a cashier, or even a waitress at a small diner. But sometimes, one act of kindness can change a life. Who in your life has made an impact, even in the smallest way? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real, powerful moments. Because kindness isn't just a choice, it's a legacy.